Everyone, it's time to pop champagne or whatever your sparkling beverage of choice is because Cortex 1.7 has finally been released. As I record this video, it's on its way out to the releases site, which will be linked down in the description below, along with a bunch of other information about Cortex in general and Cortex 1.7 specifically. And in this video, I want to show you everything that we've put in Cortex 1.7. It is absolutely our biggest release so far. Um, and it's I know I've said that for all the other releases, but it's absolutely true for 1.7 as well. It's so big, in fact, that we've decided that the next version is going to be Cortex 2.0. More on that in a later video, possibly a previous video. I think I talked about it a little bit last week. But this video is not about Cortex 2.0. This video is about Cortex 1.7, which is released now. But before we get into that, I want to remind everyone that every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, we host the Cortex Users Group. The Cortex Users Group is an opportunity for all of you, whether you're using Cortex right now, thinking about using Cortex in the future, or just want to know more about Cortex in general, or talk about Cherwell or ServiceNow or some of the other stuff that we're doing. Again, it's at 10 a.m. Pacific time. It's a Zoom link. There's a link down in the description below to get an invite to that event. It's come go as you please. It's for an hour from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific time. We'd love to have you. Love to have you chat with us, ask us questions, ask questions of your peers. It's a fun time. In addition to that, we'll also be launching kind of a community. Um, More on that in a future video, but stay tuned for more information about that. Once that's finally launched, I'll probably add the link to that down in the description below as well. But there will be a separate video on that. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss that announcement about the community. All right, let's talk about Cortex 1.7. And actually, let's not talk about Cortex 1.7. Let's show you Cortex 1.7. So let's switch over to the demo screen. And right off the bat, you'll see that this left sidebar is a little bit different. Let me actually zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. Before, there were 5 or 6 different options on the left-hand side. Now they've been organized into uh, kind of role-oriented uh, buckets, if you will, folders. So the first one, which is always expanded by default, is all about Cherwell data. So this is where you would go to find data that you're looking for, search for particular records, browse through the different business objects, um, and look at Cherwell's saved searches, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. Then the next bucket is all about structure, which right now is just showing one steps. We've talked in the past about showing some other types of structure from the Cherwell database, and that might be a sneak peek at what's to come in Cortex 2.0. And then finally, the administrative functions, which user management, external connections, those have been in since 1.6. View logs we will talk about in a minute. But first, I want to talk about searching since we're already on this page. And you can tell if you've seen earlier versions of Cortex, you'll notice that this screen looks quite a bit different than it did before. Obviously, you still have the search box and you still have the ability to add filters. And let's say search by, let's go with status. And at this point, I'm actually going to make things a little bit smaller. We'll search for status is equal to specific value. Let's say pending, right? We can always just search, right? The ad hoc search functionality is still there like it's always been, except now there are a couple other options. There's an edit option, which actually was there before, but it's been turned into a button. It's a little more prominent. So if you decided you didn't want to look for incidents with the status equals pending, you wanted status equals reopened or something like that, you could click this edit button. It would bring you back to this page, and you could change this to reopened. You could search again, and now you have your reopen instance. But this new save button, this is brand new. So I'm going to give this search a name, and I'll say, we'll call it reopen incidents. And my mouse comes back. We'll hit save. Now you can see the screen's updated, and it shows that I'm using a saved search. Now, this is actually different from saved searches down here. This is a brand new thing in Cortex. This is a Cortex saved search. If we go back to the main search screen, you can see there's this new table that lists out saved searches. So this is specifically saved Cortex searches, which are a little bit different from Cherwell searches because it includes this term field right here, the search term, whatever you've specified here, as well as any filters you've provided. In this table, we show the business object that the searches are related to, when they were last updated. In this case, it was basically now. This shows up as UTC right now, and the name of the search. And if you click on that, you just go right back to the search. Uh, and you can see its status equals reopened. I didn't specify a term. These are the three incidents that I searched for in that basically ad hoc search. Now at this point, I can save it as a new search. I can basically duplicate the search, or I can go back to this screen and edit it. Let's say I really did want pending. So now I can search, and now you see I have an additional option. So I'm still in the reopened incident search, but I changed my search criteria to status equals pending. Now I can save this, which wouldn't make sense because the search is called reopened incidents, and the search criteria is looking for pending, or I can save it as a new search. So I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to call this pending incidents. And when my mouse comes back, I'll be able to click the save button. And now, obviously, the title updated. If we go back to the main search page, we can see now I have two searches. I have pending incidents and I have reopened incidents. And I'm doing all of this on the demo site, which is linked in the description below. If you want to see these searches and you can actually modify them and save them as new searches, you can go ahead and do that. You can log into the demo site and play around with this. Uh, Now, what does that mean for this button here? Because this is also called saved searches. Well, we've actually improved this a little bit too, but for the most part, this is the same as it was in Cortex 1.6. This lists out all of the saved searches from Cherwell. So whatever searches were in your Cherwell database are going to be listed on this screen. The one addition we've made to this particular screen is we've added this little icon here. Let's click on this one. So here we can actually see the details of the search. So you can see it was last modified by Andrew at August, what is that? August 6th, 2021. And the filter is where rec ID is not empty, and the incident type equals incident, and the status equals new. Okay, that makes sense. And that works for all of these saved searches here. So any one of these saved searches, you can click on this little icon and you'll get all of that details. And of course, you could also click on the saved search and you'll actually get the results. Again, with the grid, as you might expect. And from this point on, everything is the same as it was in previous versions of Cortex. You can click into a record, you can export as a CSV, all of that good stuff. Browse is unchanged. You can still see a list of all of your major objects grouped by the group leader, the supporting objects, the lookup tables, and you can just click right into them and see all of the records, drill down into an actual BizOp form and see the full BizOp form. So that's searching and browsing. Again, in this new kind of Cherwell data uh, bucket folder. Now, I mentioned this view logs option down here in the administrator section. So let's talk about that for a second. In some cases, you might run Cortex and you might see strange behavior. You might see a particular form not being rendered correctly. And 99% of the time, that's because there is a particular expression that we just haven't seen in anyone else's content before, or a specific type of expression that we haven't seen in anyone's content before. It's basically new to us. And basically, as we've been building Cortex, the only things we have available to us to build to are the examples that we've seen. Now, if you've been running Cortex and working with us on any one of these scenarios, you know that typically we ask you for potentially a structure only czar, if you still have access to Cherwell, or we ask you to go to the logs, which typically show up in the Windows event viewer, and pull up some event details. Well, that's kind of a pain, and especially uh, it's frustrating when, for you all, when the person who's using Cortex is not the same as the person who has access to the server that has those Windows logs, Windows Event Viewer logs on it. So we've added this new screen so you can enable and disable logging to basically a database table within Cortex. So here you can turn on logging. So if this box is checked, it will log to a database. If this box is unchecked, it won't log to the database. And I'll leave this unchecked for the demo site. And any logs that would show up in the Windows Event Viewer instead show up, well, in addition to showing up there, they also show up here. This makes it really easy to export and share with us. This only logs to this table when you enable that setting. And so you can turn it on, go to a particular BizUp form that maybe is misbehaving, go back to this screen, turn that off, export the logs, and send them over to us. We do what we need to. And as soon as you've exported the logs, you can delete all of those logs so they're no longer stored in the database as well. This is, we've been going back and forth trying to figure out the best way to enable you to report issues to us and for us to be able to support Cortex without having to worry about what's happening with potentially sensitive data. And this is the best way that we've come up with to make that happen. A couple things that also happen if you click export logs, which there are no logs here, so uh, there's really no point in me exporting. But basically, it exports as an XML file that contains all of those log messages, as well as a couple details about your particular installation of Cortex. So things like the version of Cortex that you're running. Um, and you can read this little paragraph here that says exactly what's going to be in that file. It's also an XML file, so you can open it up and see exactly what it is that you're sharing with us. It's not encrypted, uh, so that you can see exactly what you're sharing, exactly what's going outside of your network, um, and confirm that you're okay with sharing that with us. If you need to redact any pieces of information, you can do that as well. So that's logging. Now, we've also made a couple improvements to the form experience. And I've actually showed some of these in previous videos. So here's just a BizHub form. It's just an incident. First thing is current record object values. And this is every value that's part of the record. Um, so this you can see all the details of the record, whether they're visible on the form or not. You can export this record as a CSV. But the main reason that we built this is, again, for that troubleshooting step, that debugging step. Um, and we want to give you the ability to see exactly what data you're sharing with us uh, before actually share it. So you can export a CSV, and it basically exports this record as a single row CSV. Headers, one row of headers, one row of data. You can see that CSV. You can see exactly what's going to be shared. And if there's something in there that's sensitive that you don't want to share with us, you can just remove that. Now, obviously, we would ask that the important fields, whatever fields are important for the particular situation that we're trying to troubleshoot, you would not change those. For instance, like an impact ID or an urgency ID, right? Those are not particularly sensitive to begin with. They're just IDs, foreign keys. Um, but if there's a change that's going to affect how the record relates with the other things we need to test it with, we're obviously going to need that piece of data in place. Otherwise, we won't be able to replicate the scenario. That'll be very case by case. So when you talk to us, we'll walk you through getting exactly the data that we need. And again, you have all the power to make sure that you're sharing only what needs to be shared and only data that you're okay with sharing. So this is everything we do with Cortex is all about making sure that you have control of your data and that you uh, can make sure that any sensitive data doesn't leave your data center, your application, your situation, um, and we'll certainly work with you to make sure that that's respected. Now, the other thing that we've added is the ability to see other forms in uh, for a particular business object record. So here we're showing the full form arrangement. We're showing the summary form, the overview form, all of the different tabs that go into the form arrangement. But let's say we just wanted to see the summary form, which is actually called something different. I think it's just this. So this is just that form across the top. And obviously, since that's part of the form arrangement, that's not necessarily the most helpful thing to see. But let's talk maybe about, let's say, incident overview for some reason isn't showing up correctly as part of the form arrangement. You can go directly to the incident overview form and see exactly what it's supposed to be looking like. This has been helpful for a few different reasons. One, it helps us troubleshoot if we're able to see the form looking the way it's supposed to through this drop down menu, but it doesn't show up as part of the form arrangement. We're able to drill into our form arrangement logic and determine, where we're going wrong, what we're not showing properly. Same thing with things like embedded forms. We've had a couple situations where embedded forms were not getting chosen correctly, and being able to use this drop down has allowed us to figure out what was going on and fix the issue. So you actually won't see any of that because we fixed a lot of that in 1.7. Uh, and some of these other situations, like this incident summary, I'm not entirely sure where this form shows up or what expression or logic would cause this form to show up in this particular database. But I don't have to. I don't have to go to a particular incident and find the one specific incident that's going to show this particular form. I can show this specific form with this specific record and see that it looks the way I expect it to. And maybe that's useful for a particular audit use case. Um, or you're trying to replicate a form in your new system and you just want to see that form. You don't really care what incident it comes from. You just want to see that form. So this is a myriad of uses, and it just helps us all out with everything going on with Cortex. Now there are a few other things that I can't show you because they're kind of behind the scenes. Um, so one is that we have better support for 8.x and older databases. So again, this particular database is, I think 2023.1 is what I installed this from. But obviously we support all the way back to uh, probably unofficially all the way back to 8 dot something. Officially, it's still 9.4 or 9.5. I forget exactly what time frame it is. But I know lots of you are using some of those older databases. So in the last 2 or 3 months, we've focused a lot on trying to get all of that 8 dot whatever content working really well with Cortex. We haven't gone all the way back to 4.6, 4 dot whatever, 5.11, all those older versions yet, but eventually we'll get there. Especially if someone comes to us and says, "Hey, we want to use Cortex, but we haven't upgraded since, insert version here." But 8.1, I believe, is the oldest database that we've tested, and I suspect that 8.0 would work as well because structure-wise, there aren't that many changes between 8.0 and 8.1. Uh, but all of that old content, older content, all of the folks who have been using Cherwell for the last decade or longer, all of your databases are now supported by Cortex with Cortex 1.7. Um, and anything that's not supported or doesn't look correctly, we'll work with you to figure out why it's not looking right and make sure that it works correctly. If not in Cortex 2.0, as soon thereafter as possible. So if you want to see Cortex 1.7 on your database, links down below to schedule some time with me, and we'll make it happen. The other thing that I can't really show, um, again because it's a backend thing, is we've talked about these three options down here, and of course, this is an override on top of what's in the Cherwell database. This is an override on top of what's in the Cherwell database. This is a completely separate table. All three of these pieces of functionality have to write to a database somewhere. In Cortex 1.6 and possibly 1.5, I don't remember exactly when I added some of this functionality. Uh, it wrote to a separate schema within the same database. So basically, we could use the same database connection. You configured it all at once when you installed Cortex. And if Cortex had write access to this separate part of the database, it would use that for some of this Cortex specific stuff. Obviously, Cortex was totally happy if it didn't have write access. You just couldn't use some of this functionality. That is still the case. If you need Cortex to have no write access whatsoever to any database, it needs to be read only 100% of the time. Cortex will still function just fine. But in Cortex 1.7, we've added the ability to configure what that database connection is for the Cortex specific stuff. So if you wanted to have your Cherwell data on one SQL server and the Cortex specific stuff on another SQL server, you could do that. If you wanted it to be on the same SQL server but in completely separate databases, you can do that as well. If you're okay with the default scenario, which is the same database, but all of the Cherwell data is in the DBO schema by default, that's where it went, and all the Cortex stuff is in the Cortex schema, that's what it will default to. Again, if it is able to write to that separate schema. And we're more than happy to walk you through the complexities of that. I know that's a bit technical, and it doesn't surprise me if that's a little confusing. It's not documented at the present moment. We're working on updating our documentation for some of these new features. That one's probably the most important one for us to document. But in the meantime, we're more than happy to walk you through that and talk you through some of the technical implications of that, and make sure that you're okay with what that means for data security and all the read-only, read-write capabilities that need to be in what places. All right. So with that, that is pretty much a deep dive into Cortex 1.7. We're really excited about this release. It's an amazing amount of features, bug fixes. A lot of it, the vast majority of it, has been in response to requests from folks just like you. Um, either to make it easier for us to work with you, for you to work with us and provide us data and information about how the system is working on your particular database, or to satisfy specific use cases that you have. And please keep those requests coming. There's a link down in the video description. My cats are wrestling to my left. There's a link down in the video description to a site where you can submit feature requests and suggest new things that to go into Cortex. You'll notice that some of them uh, are marked as done. Some of them have been added in Cortex 1.7. Those cats are the ones that were wrestling. Um, and some of them are still on the table. They haven't been implemented yet. They probably will in the near future. If you have something to add, definitely go to that link and add that in, and you'll be kept up to date as we evaluate it, start working on it, finish it, that sort of thing. With that, I'm going to end the video. Thank you all for watching. If you made it to the end, thank you for sticking with me to the end. Um, if you're on an earlier version of Cortex and would like to upgrade to Cortex 1.7, again, it'll be available on the releasing site. You can go ahead and download it, and it's basically a drop-in replacement. Um, there aren't any changes to the configuration file, but you're more than welcome to try out some of the new functionality that might require some changes to the config file. Again, we can walk you through that until the documentation is up to date. But your old configuration file will work just fine. Um, if you're new to Cortex and want to take it out for a spin, you can download Cortex 1.7 and install it on your system. And if you want to move beyond that, if you want to ask us questions, if you want to see a more in-depth trial demo, that sort of thing, reach out to us. Again, links in the video description. If you have questions, drop a comment down below. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. And again, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel, because we've got lots of things on the docket coming out in Cortex 2.0. Again, we'll talk about the community, and when we finally announce that, there will be a video about that. And you don't want to miss that. Um, and again, join us on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific time for the Cortex users group. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you very, very soon.